By the way, I'm Kevin Hardwick, and it's my privilege to have been your county legislator for the last 6 years, and I do appreciate everybody coming out this evening. I want a conversation. I want to talk to people. I want to hear what's on your mind. I want you to talk to each other. I do want to introduce a few guests. First, a gentleman who's kind enough to be here, Earl Gingerich over here. He is the supervisor of the town of Marilla. He's as I understand, you're not only a public official, but you are a farmer, correct? He's also on the Erie County Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board. So he brings a unique perspective here. Part of the problem, I think, in the 6 years I've been your county legislature, we haven't done this. I mean, if you're down in Marilla, if you're down in Concord, if you're down in Holland, I mean, this is like you can set your watch by it. You're going to do this every year, and you know the law, and everybody understands what everything is all about. That's not the case up here. I mean, I have learned more than I ever wanted to about agricultural districts in the last week and a half, and I want to thank many of the people who have helped educate me. But I've also picked up a lot of misinformation. I mean, within the course of hours, I've had public officials at different levels of government giving me contradictory information, and that's why I think if we're all in the same room, I think we can get to where we should be. Anyway, Earl is here, and we certainly thank him. From Erie County, Commissioner Tom Deering from Environment and Planning is over here. He's joined by a deputy, Michael Licurdo, and Elias Redden from Department of Planning. Unlike the commissioner and the deputy, he actually does things, he gets things done, right? He's a doer. They are planners. Also, most important, then we have from the Department of Health, Ben Swanakamp over here. Also, town of Grand Island, we've got the new supervisor, Nathan McMurray, over here. I saw Ray Billica come in. I'm not sure where Ray landed. Ray is over here, and I saw Mike Madigan just come in. I hope I've got everybody. So those are the only introductions I want to make. Those of you who have applied to join the Amherst Agricultural District know that the process has been anything but smooth. There have been a lot of fits and starts. We're now at the point where it's landing in my lap as your county legislator. We now have before the county legislature at our meeting this afternoon a resolution concerning inclusion of new properties into the agricultural district, which then the final resolution, where Erie County gets done with it, will happen 2 weeks from today at our regular full legislative meeting on January 21st, Thursday, January 21st at 2 o'clock, when the full legislature will take up the issue. And after that, we wash our hands of it, and it goes to Albany, and that's up to the Commissioner of Agriculture and Markets of New York State to certify the resolution. About a week ago, I had a meeting with folks from the Department of Environmental Planning. I had previously received a letter about the same time. I got a letter from the town board raising issues with the whole process, with certain properties, questioning whether we might be better off just to slow down. Nothing is critical, nothing is urgent like needs to happen today. The master plan for the town goes back to 1998. This, whatever we do, is going to have an impact on Grand Island, for better or for worse. And maybe it would be a good idea just to slow things down, put this off for a year, make everybody reapply, and get the town board involved. I said, and realize this is other public officials talking to me as a public official. And oftentimes we'll disagree. I don't think anybody has an agenda. Trust me, no one is out there trying to hurt the people. I just think people have different viewpoints, and I understand where those recommendations came from. The recommendation that we slow down, because I think we do need to do more planning on Grand Island. And that's something, hopefully, that the new supervisor is interested in. I'm pretty sure he is. And I think the other members of the town board are interested in that, and something that needs to be done. But I said, why don't we, this was last Wednesday, why don't we instead, I mean, there are properties on the island that no one seems to have a problem with that, you know, actually should be, you know, no harm to put them in an agriculture district. Why shut the whole process down? Why not go incrementally and start that? Here's where I am right now. The Erie County Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board made its recommendations. Most of the properties, most of the applicants got in, some didn't make the cut. The town board, in their letter to me, or it was a letter drafted by their attorney representing the town board, indicated that they weren't sure, number one, that, you know, anything should be happening, you know, the whole slow down thing, which is fine. I mean, I think that's a rational position. But then they said, but if you decide to go ahead and put some properties in it, we would agree with the Ag Board's decision not to include these properties, and they list them, and I have the exhibit here, and in fact, Sue, why don't you start circulating that? Then they list other properties that the Ag Board put in, said should be in the district, and said we have serious questions about this, and they listed the questions concerning them. And I, in my deliberations with people that I talked to, including applicants, including county officials and town officials, I have focused in on this Exhibit C, which I'm passing out. This is not the entire letter. This is just the Exhibit C, and you can see which properties there are. If you were an applicant and you don't find yourself on this list, then the board wanted you in, and the town, you know, has no issue other than the fact that maybe, you know, the whole question of should we do ag districts on Grand Island to begin with. And if that's the case, so if you're not on this list, I don't have a problem with it, and you know, my feeling is, unless someone changes my mind tonight, or, you know, in the next couple weeks, to go ahead and include the people on that list in the district. The question then comes down to 7 properties that they, you know, for me, my focus, 7 properties that the town board highlights as saying, you know, even if you accept the premise that ag districts or an ag district property should be on Grand Island, we don't think these should qualify, or we have serious problems with these. Now, of the 7, there are 2 that I can eliminate right away. One's not a problem. So it comes down to 5 properties. The thing is, some people are of the opinion that you have to be in an ag district. If you're in an ag district, your assessment gets lower, you're going to pay lower taxes. Or that if you are not in an ag district, or if you're not in an ag district, you can't get that. The two are not related. I mean, they're related because they have to do with assessment and agriculture, but you can get the lower assessment, the tax benefits of being a farmer without being in an ag district. And just because you're in an ag district does not mean you're going to get those benefits. Am I right? Right. Everybody agree? Okay. That's why we, yeah, okay? Yeah. I think there was one more thing in it. Oh, and just because you're in an ag district, I mean, you know, let's say you have a neighbor and you're worried that now they're in an ag district and oh, the town can't regulate them. That's not the case. The town can still regulate you. You're still subject to town regulations. If you're in an ag district and the town passes an ordinance, and I'm not familiar with the town laws, but they say you can't have, you know, more than a couple goats or whatever. You're still subject to that unless you go to Albany to the Commissioner of Ag and Markets and get the commissioner to say that's an unreasonable regulation. Or they say the setback, you have to have a setback from your whatever, you have to move your fences back from your neighbor's property lines. The town can still regulate like that, but if it's an unreasonable regulation, you, the person in an ag district, have a recourse, you know, one more recourse, and that's to go to Albany and get the Commissioner of Ag and Markets to say that's unreasonable in the town, you know, and then they get involved. Correct?
Correct.
you know, we have this board, and they went through this process and the public hearings, and you know, they made some decisions. To the extent possible, I don't want to vary from their decisions, because that's what we asked them to do, and I think I want to respect those decisions to the extent possible. However, when the town board comes in with a letter and says, hey, you know, this is the case, and you can ask, why didn't the town board act sooner? I personally suspect it's because this sort of thing doesn't happen on Grand Island on a regular basis, and they were a little bit slow, you know, to react. But regardless, it's, you know, I have this letter, and I want to, I'm paying attention to it, because I respect the members of the town board, both the old town board and the new town board.
And that letter may not represent the new town board.
Thank you. Well, all right. Anyway.
I'd like to talk about the Langfield property. It's right next door to me. I went through because I'm going to be putting a subdivision someday down there, and because of the inclusion factor, that's why I want it out, okay? The Langfield property is 19 acres of landlocked property, basically. It's got frontage on Whitehaven where the house is, but that's going to be landlocked forever, okay? Because even our subdivision will not be able to reach her property. Same with the other subdivision, it'll be on the west side of her, and there'll be quite a few distance. For a couple of goats, 20 acres is plenty. And I have no complaint against my neighbor, because I think it's a wonderful thing.
Susie.
Yes. Well, you had raised the question of saying that the Farm Protection Board went through their, you know, their procedures. I'm not sure that this has been brought up or not, but I was unanimously included in the original meeting without Rex Silius even being on the radar. He was unfortunately excluded in that first round. So I'm having a little hard time understanding why the town has taken it upon themselves to go against what the Farm Board has originally recommended. And the DEP was even, you know, there was no flags raised with regards to that. So that's why I'm a little...
Sure, and that's why we're here. And I think on the list, you can see on Exhibit C, they say it's zoned R1, it's in a sewer district, and, well, I think Trixilius, you know, is material. So the fact that it's zoned R1, and again, I think I had a discussion with a gentleman from, I had two gentlemen named John at the Department of Agriculture and Markets, and I mentioned this specifically, you know, well, some of the objections from the town are because they're in R1 districts, you know, residential districts. And the gentleman, and I can't remember which John it could have been the head of the Ag District program, or it could have, it was something very interesting. He said, you know, people who are farming, who are in a residential district, are the ones that this is intended for. You know, they're the ones that need the protection from development the most because they're surrounded by it or have that potential. And that's a different way of looking at it. You know, I think you got a situation on Grand Island where, you know, Grand Island doesn't know what it is. Is it, you know, a rural community? Is it a bunch of subdivisions? Should we develop it and get the tax base and lower the taxes? Should we keep it green? I mean, it's at a crossroads. And perhaps, I had this discussion with the planning commissioner this afternoon. And, you know, Grand Island is at a crossroads. And last week, he said, in the course of our discussion, that what Grand Island really needs to do is update its master plan. And if they want to do that, he thought that the county could help, and maybe you want to talk about that. Maybe that's the good thing, the opportunity that comes out of this mini crisis, is that, you know, we can have that debate and do it in the planning process. Tom, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Ag districts traditionally have been used as one of many tools to preserve areas and towns that are people traditionally associate with farming. And it's one of many, many tools that are used. And to be honest with you, it's not a real powerful one. But we try to, when we look at proposals for parcels to be included in ag districts and rural districts to be created, we look at it from a land use planning perspective. We look at the local master plan that's been done for the town, any county planning documents that are available. And the town's master plan is the last one that was done was 1998. Now most master plans need to be updated every 10 years, or they're really out of date. One of the critical discussions that occur when a community prepares a comprehensive plan is what does it want to be? Does it want to be rural? Does it want to be, are there areas of the town that should be developed, and if so, where? If we're trying to preserve open space, where should it be preserved? So we strongly encourage the town to pursue an update to that plan and engage the entire community in this debate as to what the town wants to be. And then it becomes very easy when these this open enrollment period comes forward and folks are petitioning to get into ag districts. And we at the Department of Environment Planning do have some financial resources that we could possibly make available to the town to help them do that. Now, this is not something that can be done in 6 months. It takes you know, a year and a half to do it right. But there are some towns in the county that we are really actively pursuing to update their plans, and they're usually the towns that are partially developed and partially not. And it's where there's a lot of conflict oftentimes occurring between developers and community groups and whatever. Grand Island is one of them, Elma is one of them, Clarence is one of them. So those are the communities we really try to work with to make sure their plans are always current and up to date.
And, you know, failing to at least try to achieve some sort of a consensus through the master planning process is what gets us in a room here like today.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing regarding the discussion regarding a master plan. While there may have been a master plan not updated since 1998, the town board certainly did let the community have a glimpse of what it perceives as its values. And in November 2011, they wrote a right to farm law, and they said the legislative intent was this: the board recognizes that farming is an essential enterprise, an important industry which enhances the economic base, natural environment, and quality of life on Grand Island. It is the general purpose and intent of this law to maintain and preserve the rural traditions and character of the town, to permit the continuation of agricultural practices, and to protect the existence and operation of farms. Today, John Brennan called me. He was the gentleman that
I talked to John, yes.
And he had a very long discussion with me. One of the things that he mentioned in particular was they are prepared to offer the town a $25,000 grant to prepare an agricultural protection plan. Not unlike many other communities in the area that have done that. It would assist the town if there were any question about drafting future laws that would comply with the statute. So in a sense, you would never be out of compliance. So it is certainly something that they're offering, and without even getting into that program, they're offering their help to you in general, both from the legal counsel and from the Ag District Formation Manager.
They were, so you got only to talk to one John. He didn't need a lawyer there to, he was trusted to talk to you, and they didn't trust him to talk to me without a lawyer. Is that what you're saying?
John Brennan is the program manager.
Director,
and
okay.
he and I are always in the same agreement.
Anyway, I think that's awesome. I mean, and you know, it's something that should happen. Yes.
Mr. Hardwick, I'm sorry, I'm Dr. Levy, but you're a representative, so I appreciate you being here, and I thank you for your concise.
You're welcome.
Synopsis, I guess, of the issues at hand regarding how the town law can't be circumvented, and
I'm sorry, what was that you just said?
town law, you know, they can make ordinances and they can't be circumvented. You made some specific details about. You made some comments. And you did a nice
Well, no. What I said was, if you're in an ag district, the town can still regulate you, but if it's deemed, if you think it's unreasonable, you have an additional recourse to go to Albany, the Commissioner of Ag and Market, and the Commissioner of Ag and Market can say, hey, that's unreasonable.
Reasonable within your.
So I wasn't saying it
Okay, no, but I
can't be
you're right.
circumvented.
I mean, I
just want to. Well, you
using
know what?
those words that I heard earlier.
Here's the thing, and that's why, just as a point of information, it's why we're together in this room, because you hear that and you tell someone else, and then someone, I mean, you know how that happens. That's why it's good we're together.
The question that I'm trying to offer here is, as our representative, you made a great synopsis of the issues, and I think you have a good understanding of it. What I'd like to ask you, as our representative, is we're all here. There's a lot of people here. Well, you know, it seems as though there is such a thing as an ag district, and people want to be in it. And you're talking about being both a crisis and a consensus.
And an opportunity.
And an opportunity. What I'd like to know is, how do you see, why are we here? Can you give me a synopsis of why the people here are sitting here? Can you explain to the whole room in a very short, sweet, why, what is the crisis, what is the consensus, and why we're sitting here?
We're here, and he told me the answer would be
Enforcement.
Huh?
Enforcement.
You said no. You said chickens.
Chickens, too.
Yes, chickens. And enforcement, and I mean that's what he said, that the ag district
The
wasn't.
underlying problem is what?
I think I know the other. Let me ask you. As far as I can see, based on my brief discussions with you, it seems that you feel your rights to use your property as you see fit are being unreasonably impinged. And you're looking for protections that the town is not giving you.
Yes.
Correct?
And
So let me just say one thing about it. So you have the right. The town is not in jurisdiction over this issue, and that's why Kevin's here. You can apply for whatever you want to apply. Now, if you're a farm and anyone can see you're a farm, there's nothing we can do about it. Even if we hate the fact that you're going to get additional protections and rights, the law is there to protect farmland. And if you're a farm, you guys can go ahead and apply. I will fight for your rights to do whatever you want to do with your land. That being said, to the extent those rights don't impinge on your neighbors. So I want to work out a solution. And there's not that many issues. And I want to propose those who have issues should come see me so we can talk it out and we can figure out what the problem is. I think that's what we need to do. I think some of you, I want to understand, first of all, these people on this list, what you think, why you think you were unreasonably denied, so we can talk it out and I can share with the other board members. And for the rest of you, I think we need to think bigger, and Kevin, we can all talk about this right now. What has caused you to feel so under threat?
there we are. That's it.
Well, it was back to a town situation. This was not a county situation. This was not, I mean, for most people, it wasn't an ag thing. This wasn't your first choice. But town regulations,
Lack of response.
well, I wasn't here. I'm not, I'm not a town official. I live in the, but the point is, I mean, there was, my sense was not, hey, we ought to get into the Amherst 17 Agricultural District. Your first was, I want to have a very affectionate goat, on my doorstep, and I want the town to let me to do that. And apparently you ran into,
Nothing but headaches.
And apparently the town, and you said, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, Susie, but you probably said, well, here's another option. Maybe I can get around the town.
Well, I moved literally across the street and acquired more land to be able to start to do farming.
Yeah.
I had, like you said, if it's a neighbor issue, I have letters already signed from my neighbors all around me. You look at my property on Google Earth, I have nobody behind me but the Grand Island High School on Ransom. He has about, Mr. Drexelius has about 60 acres to my right. There's open space, I don't know who owns it to my left. I don't see where the issue is when you say it's zoned R1D and there's a sewer line, yet the farm board has allowed other properties to be included in Grand Island, hasn't raised flags about those properties. Why am I being targeted?
And I think that's one of the, before we go to Tom, can I ask you, did you get an answer to your question? Did I
It boiled down to that, yeah, and I think, from my perspective, I think there's pragmatism and then there's philosophical arguments. I think laws have to be enacted that are pragmatic and can be functional. And if you have concerns that really aren't realistic, but you have concerns, my gosh, somebody could put a pile of manure 4 feet off your property line and everyone would have a big problem with that. Well, I think that's a nice philosophical argument, but I guess we've had on the island a law that's allowed, as I was understanding from Keith, he would tell you better, it's a nuisance law that actually can be enacted at any time, and yet it's not been used.
And a complaint law is what it is.
Complaint law. And regardless of whether you're an ag district or not, you can enforce that unless the state comes in and says that's unreasonable. And that's our understanding.
So at some point, I mean, our previous supervisor, when you would say that we have a problem here, it kind of fell on deaf ears in many respects.
Yeah, and I mean, the previous supervisor is not here to defend herself, but I gotta believe also, and I think everybody's gotta understand, I'm sure somewhere along the way in some of these instances, there had to be complaints from neighbors. You know, I've been through enough of these to know that that's what happens.
Well, the only reason I even bring up the other supervisor, I understood the law that was written that controls the agriculture on Grand Island was written under her step. Is that correct?
The right to farm law that Keith was.
Is that correct? Yeah.
I assume it is. Again, I'm not a Grand Island official.
I'm just saying I think it was spearheaded there. In either case.
I was working on keeping the bills in town back then.
But I think at this point, there's enough.
After this season, I know somebody who wished we let it go.
But I mean, at this point, I think there's enough people here that feel that maybe the law that was written was not functional. That's what I'm talking between pragmatism.
Yeah. Thank you. But I just want to make sure your question or point we addressed it.
Thank you.
Tom first, then.
I'm from Farmville, and I'm also from Clarence. I have cattle and horses. And about 7 or 8 years ago, we decided Erie County Farmville to try and get every town to pass a right to farm law. So far, there's 25 towns in Erie County, and we have 23 towns that passed it. And the main reason towns passed this is to protect the rural flavor of their town. And everybody in Grand Island should understand that. Like in Clarence, our deal is 50% of Clarence is always going to stay green, and 50% can be developed. We ought to do the same thing here in Clarence and Grand Island, and protect all these farms, and that's all we're here for. Farmers here.
And that can be accomplished. I mean, you're talking a master planning process, right? Which gets us back to the offer, which again, I think is the opportunity here. Because if that's where the town wants to go, and I don't live on Grand Island, if that's where folks want to go, the consensus is that, then the way to accomplish that is through good planning. Tom, are you?
Now, the question I have is you were there when this was all handed to the clerk of the legislature, meeting in East Aurora, right?
You mean down in East Aurora at Roycroft?
Right.
I was there, yes.
And what we had on that list was agreed to by everyone here in our group. It was agreed to by the Farm Bureau. They, had some look at it. And from that time to now, what has changed? That all of a sudden, these parcels are being extracted and pinpointed.
What's happened is this letter, and again, this isn't the entire letter, but this is, this is the exhibit and.
Now this is a letter from the town.
From the town.
Which I believe Nate's had a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
And if as your county legislator, I mean, I represent 3 municipalities, city and town of Tonawanda and town of Grand Island. I'm not just going to blow off the town board of Grand Island or Tonawanda or city. So I mean, I've got to take this seriously, Tom.
Correct. And
you wouldn't want me to do otherwise.
No.
Because they represent everybody in the town.
Should that letter be looked at and analyzed for truth, or?
Well, here it is, and like I say, a lot of the objections seem to be the R1 zoning, and I've already talked about my conversation with John Brennan and John Rusnicka, and one of them pointed out, maybe this law really is for our, I mean, they need it most, they need the protection most when they're in situations like this, and maybe that's something that the town board hadn't considered.
Well, Kevin, I'll jump in and say something. You're a college professor, and I'm sure this is something you teach your students. You're flooded with a bunch of information. It comes from a textbook, it comes from TV, it can come off the internet. And you've got to filter that information. Some of it's crap, some of it's useful. But you can't go focusing on everything, and you can't just latch onto something that's irrelevant. The Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board reviewed all these properties, and they made recommendations. They looked at the law, they applied the law to the best of their abilities with the facts that they were given by the DEP. And there was a problem in that, and that the DEP didn't always give them correct facts for all of the information. But they made a number of recommendations. Now, here we have a town attorney, just to address this particular letter, because apparently this is the reason why we're here tonight. This town attorney doesn't even do his homework, does no due diligence. Essentially his letter is, these people are trying to subvert the law. They're actually supposed to be farming their own ag district. That's what they're just doing. They're trying to subvert the law by just getting in on this open enrollment period. Now, when I mentioned this to a couple of people who are on the AFPB, the Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board, they're familiar with this. You as a legislator are instantly familiar with this. The county is aggregating, they're consolidating its districts. So we're going from 14 districts down to 4. Had the town attorney done any iota of homework, he would have known that his entire letter was a waste of time. It was absolutely useless, it was ridiculous.
Well, I haven't even chosen to focus on that. I mean, as you know tonight, first off, as I went into this, I dismissed that right away. I mean, I said that's not an issue
right
for
off
me.
the top, and so we have dismissed it. We see right off the top, this is ridiculous. So then we get to the second part of the letter, which is basically this Exhibit C.
Correct.
And then, so we focus basically towards the bottom of the letter, where there's 7 properties, as you said, we're just striking 2 off. And then we're looking at these 5. And once again, we have a number of issues being raised that, as you would tell your students, I'm sure you have to filter the information. There's a lot of stuff here that is absolutely irrelevant. So as I'm sure John Rosnicka or John Brennan both told you when you spoke with them, zoning, the R1D, the residential zoning, is irrelevant. It is an irrelevant factor. So we just take that off the table. Great, now we have more things we don't need to discuss. But the in-sewer district is irrelevant. This whole thing was kind of turned around backwards by people saying, well, geez, if you've got a sewer district, we can't have farming. But that's not the case.
That's exactly what I'm doing. I mean, am I not doing that? I told you, I brought up the point about the R1 zoning, which is exactly.
Kevin, what I'm hearing you say is, you're trying to do it in a debate, but I think you could say it straight up. If you said, and I'm thinking this way, because if we applied to the state, to the if we said the town is being onerous on us and we don't want them to do what they're doing, the state would come down and say, yes, we agree. Now we're asking you to say, R1D zoning is invalid. It doesn't count. Sewer is invalid, doesn't count. And surrounded by a development, doesn't count. If they're all removed from the list, all of them go in.
Because
they're all invalid.
And here's what I'm saying. I wanted to do that, work towards a conclusion tonight with everybody present. So, and that's why I stopped when I cited the law and said, when you're in, you're in. Does anybody have a problem with that? Because in the course of the last week or so, people have, we've gone back and forth on that. Now I want everybody in the same room agreeing on a set of facts so we don't have 2 different set of facts. And
the legislature. There's a public hearing that the legislature holds. Anyone can come to the public hearing and comment on anything. And during that public comment period, folks are allowed to submit letters to the legislature. They're clocked in, they're part of the record. And that's how the town of Grand Island submitted their letter. Our department submitted a letter. And it's information for the legislature to help them, that we hope they would consider in making their decision. And that is valid. John Brennan, talked to him as much as you have, Mr. Trippi, and he seems to tell you something different.
Please, let him finish.
And so I think with the Grand Island, and this is, I'm just trying to explain what I think the Grand Island letter was trying to say in terms of zoning, because zoning doesn't matter to as far as whether or not you're can be in the ag district.
Great, that's one.
And neither does being in the sewer district. But what those elements indicate is that it's an area of the town, at least through their ordinances, where they see future development occurring. And that's, I think, what the letter was trying to say. And that is something towns I have seen throughout the county bring up during the ag district process. And it's perfectly acceptable to debate that. And this is kind of what I'm getting back to the need of Grand Island to really re-engage themselves in the planning process and start to look at their comprehensive plan. And that was done almost 20 years ago.
I think Keith wanted to respond. And then
I want to respond to Mr. Deering specifically said, and I'm sure if there's anyone who questions this, please stop. He specifically said that there was a public hearing on the 19th of November anyone could submit comments. But as a matter of fact, you did not. That period closed, just like from September 1 to 30, you had to submit your applications. If you didn't, that process closed. And in fact, when your department lost 6 applications, that gentleman right there told me, too bad, those people are just going to have to apply next year. Until, that's exactly what you said.
All right.
Okay,
That's exactly what you said.
You know what, you know
But
what?
I'll just continue on. But, so then, when it was brought to the attention of Ag Markets, John Russinick again had a phone conversation with you. And that's why we had to have something that's never happened before in the con. There had to be a second meeting of the AFP, where those properties were reviewed by the board again. What was stated a moment ago was, the letter was submitted by DEP. That's not true. The letter I have is right in front of me. It was allotted to the legislature. It is dated December 10th, 2015, well beyond the public comment period. And this is a problem all of us have in the group. The public comment period closed, we're held to certain timelines, but then you have people jumping at this late stage making these ridiculous, irrelevant issues that were already brought up at the AFP level.
Which leads to this.
Well, here's the thing. I don't want to revisit what's happened. As I indicated right from the start tonight, this has had fits and starts, and it hasn't been a smooth process. But the fact is, we're here, and this is something, whatever goes in that resolution, whatever properties, are going to be in there until 2023. And I don't want to, I mean, you know, you can look all over Erie County and you can cite planning mistakes, and I mean the big ones, you know, the university where it is and the stadium where it is and everything like that. And, you know, we're stuck with that. And I don't want, on a smaller scale, to be stuck with a property in there, you know, that shouldn't be in there just because a letter came in late or something. The fact is, this information is in front of me. I was at all 5 of these properties that I'm focused in on. And again, those are, I did, as you suggested, whittle down the information because there is all sorts of information. And I'm focusing on those 5 properties. And I visited all 5 properties, and I talked to 4 of the
Did get to talk to me.
Are you sure, O'Connor?
No, I'm one of the.
This gentleman from
No,
Manila wants to.
no, wait.
Can he add something real quick? He has a custom comments about that.
Sure, O'Connor. Which one are you?
Or B or B.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That's not one of the 5.
Okay.
I'm talking about the 5 on the.
Okay,
I mean, the ones you were not recommended to go in from the agriculture board.
Okay. I was not able to make any other meetings because I kept getting sent out of town or elsewhere.
No, the only one I wasn't able to talk to someone, I did walk around the property, you know, take a peek, for sure, O'Connor. Anyway, you know, I mean, and I'm glad I did. And I waited till yesterday to do it because it was warmer. I wasn't going to do it early in the week, but I really enjoyed it. And it was very eye-opening, because even some of those that are in R1, I mean, the one I didn't get to, the Sure O'Connor property, it's an R1, but it's at the end of a dead end. In fact, it's past the dead end, you know, sign, and it's like just nothing behind it. And you don't see that on a sheet. And that's good. And I found that with a number of properties. And quite frankly, I felt a lot different about the properties going there than I thought I would have, you know, before I went. And that's why I did that. And I'm good. You know, but again, I want to realize I did this research, you know, yesterday, the day before, Monday, or whenever I called, talked to Albany. I had to get this letter out before New Year's, you know, I mean, in the mail, in the weekend. So, I mean, if I knew then what I knew now, this meeting might not be necessary. I might have just talked to the 5 people that I want to focus in on.
So how do we resolve this issue right now?
Well,
I'm just trying to share his comment real quick. He wants
Sure.
Kind of look from an outside perspective, which I totally am not familiar with Grand Island. But first of all, I think you should applaud yourselves for getting to this point. 20 years ago, or 15, 20 years ago, our board, which I've served on for many years, and I don't remember when I started, worked with Chuck Swan and tried to get something started up here, and it failed. So I think you should first applaud you that you're even to this point. Second of all, I would agree with Kevin that I think this meeting was necessary, irregardless. It's good to get in a room like this, especially with the turnover with the board. Now, you stated in the beginning, and of course we sensed that right from when we had all these come to East Aurora, not once but twice, that the issue was the regulations or the ordinances that the town had put on over the years. That you couldn't have a dozen chickens somewhere or a goat or something like that. This is what I'm looking from the outside perspective. I say, and stop right there a minute. I don't appreciate that the Department of Environment Plan is getting criticized for how they handle this. Now, everybody's human and make mistakes. At no time have we ever had 50 applications come in all at once. It's unprecedented even across the state. It was a first across the state. Also, there have been a number of turnovers within the department that handles this. One of the top people now works for Western New York Land Conservancy. So the new ones here had their time to get filled in or get familiar with everything. So mistakes were made. And yes, it was nice that Mr. Trippy and others contacted me and others on the board that there was some missing. And I talked to Tom and I talked to others. And they weren't rejecting the idea that we should revisit it. And even when this issue came up now just recently, I talked to Tom, I talked to a couple at the department and around. And I called Kevin and said I would be coming and try to work with you. This is what I suggest. Now, as far as the department putting in what they feel, that is their mandate as the department, is to weigh in on what their perspective is. Yes, there's a representative that sits on our board, and they've been very supportive over the years. I mean, right down to regardless of what administration was in the office, whether it was Democrat or Republican, it didn't matter. They've been supportive ever since I've been involved in government in some sort of form, whether the president of the Farm Bureau or Cooperative Extension or on the board 10 years ago or so forth. They've been very good, and they continue to be. So let's stop there. Yes, there were mistakes made. We all make mistakes. So when they weighed in on their four, that's their mandate. That's their responsibility as a department. It's separate from our board. So just let's make that clear. I respect everyone in that department because they do fulfill a job, and I know about them personally, and we develop relationships with the new ones now. So let's stop there. I would suggest that, and I like Kevin's approach, is, okay, the board, and I don't care if it was a previous board or the present one, said there's 7, we're down to 5, and 4 of them are ones that the department has a little issue with. If Kevin and those individuals want to work it out between themselves and with the town board, so do so. We're not going to get in your way. But if you're not allowed in, you can reapply in November. Let's get the basis start. Let's have the new town board maybe form a committee of approximately 7 people sitting here, and then have somebody from the West Side Land Conservancy, such as Rachel, which used to work for the department, Rachel Katowski, and the department would work with you. And if you need somebody else on that working with you, review your ordinances, and maybe come up with recommendations to this town board, and it can be done by local law to change it. Don't take that long to do it. The process can be speeded along, but you want to do it right. To make recommendations to the town board, say, let's allow certain activities in these zoned areas. Allow that we can have a dozen chickens. It's kind of sad that Buffalo can do more agriculture than Grand Island in some respects. But so let's address it that way. So just because you don't get in the ag district, maybe it's not quite the right thing to do, and maybe it should be addressed in ordinance through a special use permit and/or. So do it that way, but you can reapply. Don't the ones that were excluded originally, the original 7 by the ag board. Don't think you can't reapply, or there's other avenues. So do it that way. Remember, comprehensive plan is good, and I wholeheartedly think that it should be updated, like Tom said here. It is a guideline, but ordinances are actually the teeth in in what's gonna go on. So that's what I would suggest from the outsider. And there's plenty of people that'd be willing to work with the new board. We got a brand new town supervisor down in Eden, and she's lost some issues, and 9 supervisors met over in Elma this Tuesday, and we all offered to help her, you know, walk through the process. And I'm sure you can get the same help from other government officials to come in and help here. So that's my suggestion.
So you're recommending we get the group that's already approved in, or that's likely to be approved in, and then work with the other ones later, and then also work on a more comprehensive zoning plan, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Those 3 steps?
I mean, but my point is, the ones that have been excluded by the Ag Board, it's, you know, unless you can work that out with Kevin, that's up to Kevin and the town board. If the Kevin and the town board is in agreement with re-including them or whatever, that's between you. We did the best job we could based on the information we had. The additional ones, again, the same thing. Kevin went and visited them personally, the new town board's here. If they don't have a problem with property A coming back in or staying in, that's fine with us. But if you're excluded because they have a little bit of concerns and want to take a little time or breather to look at it, you can reapply in November. Maybe some of those issues should be addressed through your ordinances.
I appreciate your input, but you know, part of the reason why our town board has changed over is because people like us weren't satisfied with the town board that existed. So to make a new group to do all this stuff, it's hard enough to just get people who are studied on the process, who have time and are dedicated salary persons to learn about this, to understand really the laws. That's why we went to the Ag Board, because we need somebody who really understands our rights as landowners and can help us format this. There is a nuisance law in Grand Island, so if there is a problem with neighbors, they can call. It's not like that nobody can. If you're going to try to get everybody on this island to understand what's going on, that's going to be such an onerous process. All our land will go to dust.
That's not my point. My point is, if you have an interest, form a committee. I don't care if it's too large a committee, you don't get nowhere. Form a committee of interest. If you,
that's what this is.
I have a hard time. No, to actually go through your ordinances and make recommendations.
The 2 are not mutually exclusive.
I understand. I understand what you're saying.
And my point is,
understand Grand Island as much.
my point.
It's way easier to deal with this stuff.
Excuse me. My point is very simple. Is you got people out there like Rachel at Western Atlantic, so you got people in the department that would actually help
No,
them through
I
that.
appreciate that. Yeah.
And would work with the group and come up with recommendations of their own to work off of. And if there's such an interest that you can take this much time out and you have 40-some people or 50-some, I think you can find 4 or 5 to work on a group with a couple outsiders or with a board member or whatever it might be to do that.
I mean, I think that's great advice. I mean, I think everybody can work together, come together. There's no need to have 2 armed camps, which too often in this process, I think it has been, but that's why I want everybody in the same room.
But where are the 2 armed camps coming
I want to, excuse me?
Where are the 2 armed camps coming from?
Well,
Developers and farmers? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't think so. Kevin,
No,
can I interject something, please?
yeah, certainly, Right.
I'm a man on an island here. I'm the only guy left over from the previous town board that's at this meeting. Chris Veronica talked to me, he said that he was probably going to be late, if here at all, because he had an appointment out at Orchard Park. I'd like to let you know that in our discussion on this whole thing, there was a lot of discussion. Some discussion of the things that we said, and I don't have them in chronological order. I'm going to have to think these up. The other things I have on a piece of paper right here. And the fact that agricultural use is something that you are allowed to do in R1A. It's an allowed use, just like you can build a house, you can do agriculture. If you want to keep agricultural animals, you have to get an agricultural special use permit through the town of Grand Island, allowed in many districts. Now there are restrictions to that. It was written before me. I wasn't around when that code was written. It was written probably to protect your neighbors. I don't mean you. Protect the neighbor from the keeping of agricultural animals, so that the barn was 200 feet away from the neighboring residence and the manure pile was at least kept back there and it wasn't smelly, and these and those are the regulations that the town had in there to try to protect surrounding neighbors. And a public hearing always gives the ability of anyone, as Tom said, to stand up and say why yes it should happen and why maybe no it shouldn't happen. So that's that. We also, as Keith mentioned, the town board at that time thought it was important to have a right to farm law. And we passed that right to farm law because we thought it was important for the farms that are operating to operate and not be so restrictive. And if there was a problem, the right to farm law allows for an arbitration process, not an automatic, the town saying you can't do it. So that gave you the ability there. Now let me address the chicken thing. Absolutely, positively, the chicken keeping is different than keeping horses, goats, or pigs. I wrote a law. It is at the attorney's. I wrote it before the end of the year. I had hoped it would be done by the end of the year. It's not. It's a draft law. They have it, and they're working through it to give back to the town board to write a different kind of law for the keeping of chickens versus the keeping of other agricultural animals. That is in the works. It's something that is being done. Not, is it going to be done? No, it is being done. So that takes care of that. Now let me get through some of the criteria that the town board used. Not R1, not sewer district. That was a comment that was made that, yes, they're in there. That was made by our town engineer. He went through all the properties and made some comments. We sat down with that whole big spreadsheet and we looked at it. We also looked at the law. And I would just like to read a couple things, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
Definitions. Land used in agricultural production means not less than 7 acres of land used as a single operation in the preceding 2 years for the production of sale or sale of crops, livestock, or livestock products of an average gross sales value of $10,000 or more, or not less than 7 acres of land for a Howard Corn.
Sorry,
I don't
sorry,
need to
Ray,
do that.
is this from the town code?
No, this is the state.
This is state, okay, I think that's
Okay,
important.
this is why I'm reading it, because the town used these kinds of things to try to make a decision of whether or not properties met the criteria. So we looked at that. That's the definition.
That's only for criteria.
Then the next thing, it talks about
But
agricultural.
let's not go from there. Let's wait at that point.
Wait, we need to make a comment here.
But that's for the ag exemption.
All right.
No, it is not.
No, that's
No,
for ag exemption. Talk to that.
Wait, I'd like to, I think Earl wanted to get in here. He's dispassionate, I mean, he doesn't have a, you know.
He's got a small part of the district, that has to apply with assessment, does not apply for the definition.
Never mind.
Can I jump into something real quick?
Explain that, please, to the whole room, if you could. You understand it the best, please, so I can
Well,
hear
not
you.
necessarily the best, there's other people better than I am on it, but.
Agricultural exemption, that's what it is.
That's right.
It has to do with the agricultural exemption,
Okay.
to apply, and then you get your land classified according to soil types. So, you know, the Erie County Soil and Water would do that for you. And then the state sets up values for those land classifications, you know, A, B, C, where your soil groups are and the subcategories. And that's what your base assessment is. And you gotta meet that minimum requirement, which he's read, about the 10,000 average sales for the 2 years, the acreage. And then there's provisions in there that can go around it, like a greenhouses could be on less acreage, as long as you produce 50,000. There is, for startup farms, there's some allowances for it.
It's not ag district.
So in summary,
Ag district.
that's not the definition of an ag district. That's for assessment, it's basically 10,000 in gross sales, 7 acres.
All right.
Now, let me explain one thing. So basically, it's the totality of the circumstances that they look at when they're looking at whether, is it a farm? There's lots of factors. You know, and sewer may be considered, if it's part of a subdivision of some sort, maybe that's one of the factors to look at. But the bigger problem I have, and this is what I want to say where I'm in allegiance with you on this. If you're a farm, you deserve to be protected. And if the town laws haven't done it, we probably have to think about it. Because this is a green space between Niagara Falls and Buffalo. It always has been, it always should be. And we should figure out ways to make you feel protected. Obviously, you don't feel protected. Obviously, you don't feel protected. Just work with me. Now, okay, now let me give you my perspective as supervisor. I also want to make sure your neighbors aren't having their rights impinged upon or infringed. So this is what we're going to do. This is what I want to. You help me and I'll help you. If you are a farmer and you're not being protected, let's work out some solution. Now, whether it's the town code or we need to get you in this ag district, I'll help you do that. But at the same time, this group has to understand there's other interests on the island, and some of those interests are the ones Ray's talking about. Now, for example, when you become an ag district, despite what we talked about earlier a little bit, you do have additional rights and protections. And you all know that, or else you wouldn't be here. And you're seeking those rights and protections.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Ray, you're talking about the town and how you folks make these laws. Is the town for us getting into this ag district? It sounds like you should be.
Wait a minute, now you have New York State agricultural laws that you have to use, then build from there.
There you go.
Now this is what everybody's ignoring, ag markets.
Thank you.
That's what ag markets is there for.
Thank you.
Well, but the law,
But you can, yeah, have they ever lost a case?
I don't,
No.
what are we, when you talk about the law, what law are you talking about? The law that establishes a district or allows for the open enrollment? And the law, just to be sure, what the law says, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, is the law that is most important to you right now, which involves the open enrollment period, which is, you know, what that resolution 2 weeks from today that hopefully is passed is going to be about, gives the final say at the local level to the county legislature. I mean, right? And the law doesn't say you got to do it. It says it gives us some discretion. And that's in the exercise of that discretion. That's why I wanted, before I made a decision, to call everybody here. And trust me, I'm sympathetic. I'm focusing on these 5 properties. After my visit yesterday, I am leaning in the direction of most of you. Actually, the only problem I have, unless the town comes back and makes a case that the R1 thing or the sewer district really matters, after my conversation with Albany, is you know, your issue with the health department. I think that's an additional layer, because I have a letter from the Commissioner of Health, which we talked about, which is another, you know, is another burden, I think.
Is that something you want to bring up here?
You know what? I might in a little while, but we've got about half an hour, maybe a little bit more. I don't want it to devolve. I mean, that's a volatile issue. That's a separate issue. But in terms of where I'm at today, and it wasn't until my visit yesterday to see where these parcels actually were, because I look at a map and I say, oh, look at that, there are other houses there. But then again, I get to that Sure O'Connor one and I say, yeah, but it's at the end of a dead end, and man, that's where they're talking about this isn't a problem. The 4 of those properties, you know, maybe because of the affectionate sheep, or goat, I don't know, just sheep, sorry.
Miss, why don't you go ahead?
You know, I don't have a problem.
Going off what you said, I'm Liz Zura O'Connor. Our home is the one with the setback.
Yes.
These properties here that are rejected are at the other dead end.
And you know what?
Connected to my
I think from, unless, I mean, here's where the Farmland Protection Board made that call, and to the extent that I can, I want to rely on their expertise, on their call. And, you know, the only reason I singled out those 5 that I've been focusing on is because the town singled them out. And again, the additional problem, which we may get into later with Keithsbrook, you know, the Commissioner of Health, that's something I got to think of.
But my reason for staying on Grand Island, when you're talking about creating green space, I didn't have to move away. there was, the last house built in that subdivision where we're having all this progress was 1972. Okay, then my home in 2005.
And
My dad passed in 2002. I went through 3 real estate agents. Nobody wanted to buy it, couldn't do it. The town's got to do this, this, and this. You need a new environmental plan. I'm trying to make a long story short. When he had a real estate sign, want to know how my neighbors feel about it? 6 signs came down. Everybody's signs came down. They only put them up twice. So obviously my neighbors don't want anything going on in that neighborhood. So to make it all one block, part of an ag, now you're looking at 30 acres. So, and I'm across the street from Tommy Thompson for all intents and purposes.
It could be connected farmland.
So does he have sewer? How come he's okay? I have sewer. I don't see where the difference is in that regard.
Yep.
That's where these parts, this is never going to be a subdivision. It never will be, hasn't been in 30 years.
And I saw some of the correspondence, I think, between you and Elias, right? I think Elias or Tom provided that to me, and I got a better picture of it.
Right.
Then going out there, I mean, I get it.
And I'm
I
not
get
going to
it.
sit here and fight tooth and nail for that. I mean, I know we were approved, but I'm just saying, just the ridiculousness of it, why people are frustrated, why people are aggravated.
And you know what? I think a lot of it goes back, and a lot of the reason we're here is because it goes back to something that Earl said earlier. You know, they don't get 45 applications or 50 from one municipality in 1 year, and everybody's sort of, wow, what do we do?
Right. But obviously, there's interest in that. People want that. And I've had people email me today saying, hey, this is the first I've heard about it. My sister's got 60 some odd acres, so there's going to be a whole other crowd of people
and
coming
you know,
in.
where I hope this goes, and where I'm headed, and it's evolved over the course of a week, is that to the extent possible, you know, with the possible exception of Keith's property, and we can talk about that, is we follow the recommendations of the board, because as, who is it, Mark Gaston, is it?
Yeah,
From
Mark.
Soil and Water
Yes,
Conservation,
yes,
he's
Mark.
also on your board,
Yes,
said to me earlier this week, he says, you guys in the legislature don't want to be doing this, you know? And I'm nodding, yes, I don't want to be doing this. I mean, I don't want to be doing what they're doing. I want to respect their recommendation unless something else comes up that, you know, I should consider. And that's why, you know, I'm focused on these properties. And that's well, yes, ma'am.
We have a complex over here. This isn't the first time we tried to get an agricultural district on Grand Island. We tried in 2004. And we were told that we couldn't have it because they were in the process of rezoning and going according to the master plan. So, here we are, 12 years later. You can blame it on the town.
And by the way,
had I been your legislator in 2004, no.
I have had a business here, and horticulture business, for 30 years. 21 of those years have been held.
Well, I'm glad in the intervening dozen years we've made progress. I mean, as I say, we're here where we're here. I can see this thing going through almost as the board recommended it. And I mean, if nothing else, and I don't know if this is consolation for those of you who didn't make the board's cut, but this is something new to the island, and there's a toehold now. And next year may be different. And I think in the intervening year between now and the time we do this next year, I got to believe it's going to go a lot smoother. And I hope to God that the town takes Tom Gearing up on his offer, and Ag and Markets up on their offer for the $25,000, and does some really serious planning, and so we don't have to be, you know, so I don't have to ask the library for a big room or next year. But thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. Now you're from the Farm Bureau, right?
I just wanted to ask a question of the town. You have a right to farm law. What was the recommendation of the committee that was supposed to be formed by the right to farm
I'm newly elected.
I know,
Can't answer the question.
I am not directing, is there anybody in the room who can tell us?
There's no such.
I don't know if there is a committee.
There
It's
is,
supposed to be.
I don't know if there is one or not. There may be one,
there is not
but I
a
don't know if
committee.
there is.
There is no committee.
There should have.
10 years ago, I wrote and tried to help to rewrite Grand Island's right to farm law, and it went nowhere.
Is there a committee in the law, or is it in the law, but they just don't have one? No, but I mean, the specific law, because you can, not every right to farm law is the same. I mean, there's a template.
First of all,
Are they the same for Grand Islands is the same
so
as?
that it would be to the best interest of all concerned, not just farmers, would handle a situation where a farmer gets out of control and does something stupid.
No,
And none of us, all of us have talked. We're
I guess my
all-
question is though, you're sure that there's a committee in the law, not just because some other town has
Fairly
a
certain there's a
committee,
committee in the law.
but there's a committee in the law.
And
Okay,
Well,
but it was never
we have to write the farm.
All right.
There are two things that we kind of demanded, asked you to do. One was to have a committee,
Okay.
and the other was a sign at the entrance to the town. And you never did that either?
And Kevin, this is one of the men that was instrumental in making that.
no, time out a minute.
Can I make one comment? One thing that I see, and you guys can crucify me for this comment if you like, but we all came with a purpose of changing the town structure. And now, nobody in here is giving the town structure a chance to work.
Yeah.
You've got to give it a chance to work, guys. We
How
rose
long has
up,
the
we
town
rose up
structure been in place?
we rose
It's
up
not
to
working.
change the structure of who's in the town. We have to give them a chance to change it. Now you're crucifying the guys who don't even know what's going on here.
No, well, I think again, it comes down to, in 2 weeks, this will be done. And I've told you where where my inclination is now, unless something happens in the next 2 weeks, which, you never know. However, after that, so that we're not here again next year, I mean, there will be reapplications, there will be new applications. Again, the planning process has to proceed, and I think, and your point concerning the structure, the new supervisor, the new board, both the old board members and the new board members working together to hopefully plan Grand Island's future, that's got to happen.
Okay, first of all, your supervisor just stated to me, and I just met him tonight, that he has no problem, and he wants to support farming, and he might have a problem with maybe 2 parcels. So I think that goes to kind of.
Yeah, I went through every single one today. We looked at every single one. I looked at with the town engineer. Now, the town board may have different views on this. We're going to talk about it tomorrow, just so you know. The town board, by the way, including Ray and we have Mike back there, we're already fully engaged on this. We want to support farming on the island. Like I said before, I want to also protect some residential areas that are clearly residential areas, so I have some concerns there. But I absolutely want to support farming on the island. Why? Because it's always had farms on the island. These places, and it creates industry on the island, and it makes it a better place to live, to have farms around it.
It holds the taxes in line.
Absolutely. There's all these great things from it. So what I'm going to do is a few people that I have concerns about, I'm going to try to reach out to and meet. I'm going to talk to the town board, we're going to converse, but I just want that to be made clear. We are all trying to solve this and trying to get behind you and try to protect those people, especially those existing farms that have always been farms, and we want farming on Grand Island. So if you felt under attack in the past, don't feel that way going forward. We want to make sure that all the interests of the people of Grand Island are represented, and if this many people get together, and this many people get together in a night like this, when it's freezing cold outside, you come out here to meet and express your concerns. We know it's important, and we believe in this issue, so we will be out there trying to protect you and fight for your rights as well.
So then you're telling me that I can expect another letter from the town, or?
Well, I'll tell you this. But listen,
should we get the?
No, listen, wait.
Right now.
If there's ever a letter from the town again, it will be, in my opinion, it will have my name on it and not a law firm's name on it.
Thank you.
I'll tell you that right now. Unless there's a legal case and that we have a law firm involved, I do find it troubling, frankly. The way you described the letter in the beginning wasn't the way I saw it. I read the letter. And I think that the way the letter was sent, without consulting with this group, is troubling, frankly. And I think that correspondence from a town board that's publicly elected, that has opinions, they should have the guts to put their name on those opinions.
There you go.
Well,
Thank you.
So you're in favor of the.
Listen, it's not my authority. If you have if these guys have approved you to be in the fire district, I'm not going to get in the way and try to stop that.
Amen.
Mr. Hardwick, it's a procedural thing. As our guest from Earl made it very clear, if you weren't included in the district, then at a specific time, there is another enrollment next year that is written in law. It is written in law. There's a time period to apply. There's a time period in which you have to have all that information in. There's a time period in which they will be notified for a public hearing. There's a time period for public discussion and input at that point and not beyond that point. The question that I have, this piece of paper is predicated on a letter that came in long after all of the public opinion and comment should be made. So despite the fact that the town might want to write another letter, that may not be admissible in court. So my point of view is if they've sent a letter that didn't represent us, and it was after the time period that was, and it was in a closed-door meeting, that it was a workshop that we were not included to be in, and Mr. Billica was under the impression that the law for the agricultural district was based on that exclusionary law, and those were the opinions and decisions they made on those preface, then this piece of paper and the letter that it represented should not even be included in the discussion.
Amen.
Correct.
First off.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I get a shot at
First off, this is not a court of law, obviously. If someone has information about a property that's going to be included and it's going to be in there till 2023 at the minimum, I'd still like to hear about it because it's still my call. And I've told you where I'm at tonight. I'm going to go, unless I hear something, unless, Nathan mentioned 3 properties he's got a problem with, or may have a problem with, unless he brings further information to my attention. If he does, I'll consider it. I'm going to go with the recommendation, and the only question is Keith's property, and the problem there is the health department. And that letter from the health department, by the way, came in long after the public comment period. But still, if the Commissioner of Health, and maybe we can get into this now, the Commissioner of Health of Erie County, who it says, please,
We gotta jump when they say jump.
don't do this. I got it. You got to give some credence to that. You can't ignore that. To do otherwise would be irresponsible.
I agree with that. I mean, there's lots of considerations, as I said earlier. If I talk to you guys, and some of you are going to be mad at me, because I'm going to come to you and say, listen, I don't think you're a farm. Sorry. I respect your rights, but you don't look like a farm. Convince me that you're a farm, and I'll talk to the town board. There's a couple cases like that. And like he said, if there's other issues, we have to be addressed. But the gentleman from Clarence, how has the agri-sticks helped or hurt Clarence?
Oh, it has. Tremendous.
And I've looked at maps across New York State. The reason for this law is to protect farms. And just for example, not every ag district is continuous. I looked at some of the maps. Look at the one in Long Island. It's a Swiss cheese district. There's lots of districts like that. But what I'm saying is, there's a couple instances where I'm worried about it because it seems like it's not a farm. It doesn't pass the laugh test, in my opinion, on a couple of these. So I'll be reaching out to you people, and I'll be asking you to explain your case. I'll listen to your side, I'll explain my side, and we'll have it out. And you may not like what I say.
But at least you'll say it to our faces, so we respect that.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's the purpose.
But to that end,
that's the purpose of the meeting, where all our faces on all sides are in the same room.
The Ag Board made a recommendation for you to come in as a town supervisor going, I think they're the experts. They recommend everyone in. For you to come now and go, what? I don't think you should be in. Have you talked to the board?
The ones I'm worried about, and I'll be perfectly frank, are on this list. That they have said no. Now, if you can, that's why I want to talk to you. If you come to me and say, like the information from Liz earlier, I didn't know that information. about the future of that development. That's great additional information. So now I can reassess the judgment, but I have to talk to you. So I'm going to reach out to you and I'm going to talk to you, and we're going to have it out, and then I'll talk to this gentleman. He seems pretty reasonable, doesn't he? Yeah. So we'll talk to him and we'll figure out where to go forward.
Well, hey, one last question. I mean, these letters, and I just remember one, and it's the only reason I say is Mrs. Stino. I know her personally, we used to buy eggs from her. And she no longer can sell eggs because the town ordinance says she can't have any chickens based on, you know, the thing. What I remember, there was a meeting. We were there, the first meeting in East Aurora, and there were some rejected parcels. We had a second meeting because they didn't include 6 parcels that were actually applications completed on time, and they had to have a second meeting in East Aurora to discuss those parcels. And as I remember, and my memory sometimes doesn't work, with all due respect, I think I remember a resolution to revisit the first parcels because some information had changed and some of the ways we were figuring out how we could include and exclude may not have been in the law. And there was some arguments made, and I believe we revisited some of these parcels. The real question is, I remembered Mrs. Wynn's parcel being included in the accepted ag district. And my problem with this is a letter that, I don't know where these names came from, the town somehow pulled this out, and that came in long after any real public comment to come in. I do know there were 2 meetings. I knew there were minutes, there were people writing things down, and there were some that were rejected at the first meeting, revisited at the second meeting, and maybe you can remember, do you remember revisiting some of these parcels and then accepting them?
Yeah.
Some of them were. I think there were only like 4 or 5 parcels that were totally rejected, period, and everything else was in fact accepted by the second approved meeting by the Agriculture Board. So this list may not even be a real list.
Just I don't need to hear that. I don't hear that, but it's true. I know, I do need to hear that. I mean, that's... It is absolutely true. And so my point would be, I think the second minutes of the second meeting by the meeting of the Agriculture Board, by all the people who were there, would have to be reviewed. You will have to look and see which ones...
If it's a public meeting, we'll be able to find those.
Absolutely.
But as far as I can tell, looking at today, this is the list. Oh, maybe it's wrong.
I think it's wrong. I remember, there were many more that were accepted the second time around than on the first time.
But what you said earlier, sir, that's correct. This is not our decision. This is a county level decision. It's their authority. Now, with the board, now, in defense of the previous board, you know I don't do that too often. They tried to protect the town, to shape the, of course the town wants to manage itself. They don't want to give up jurisdiction to a higher authority. Who would want to do that? So I understand what they were doing. Do I agree with the process and how it was done? No, I don't agree with it. But please give them some understanding, some deference on that as well. That's all I'm asking.
But let me ask this, I want to move on to Keith's situation. As long as we do have someone from the health department here, and it's specific to Keith, and I want to give him a chance with myself, with the town board, with the county people here, including a representative from the health department. Talk. But before I go there, does anybody have any more questions of me, or if I really understand what where I'm at? Because we've got, okay. You're welcome to stay, obviously. But I think the rest of the meeting will be, I'll turn it over to Keith and he can talk to some people. And like I say, you're welcome to stay. Thank you all for coming out on such short notice. Thank you to Keith for, I got that letter out, but I got the letter out, and some of you got it, some of you didn't, but I did call Keith, I think, New Year's Eve or something, and he said, I've got this mailing list, or email list, and he was able to get all the information out. I thank him for that, because I'm sure some of you did not get the letter, and we did our best. And if you haven't signed, I don't know where the sign-in sheet ended up, but it's over here. If you haven't signed in, if you wouldn't mind, I would appreciate it. Keith, I'm sorry.
How many folks who have farm animals
are here, raise your hand if you have farm animals. How many of you feed your animals on the ground? The Erie County Health Department has a violation notice form that they are using. This form was never submitted to the New York State Department of Health, as is required by New York Public Health Law, Section 347. The form states, check below are violations of the Erie County Sanitary Code. Violation, ground feeding animals / birds. Correction needed, stop ground feeding. I'll repeat, this form was never filed with the New York State Department of Health, as is required by Public Health Law, Section 347. What happens when you don't file a law with the New York State Department of Health under Section 347? Your law is not effective until filed. That provision came into law in 1944. It was actually enacted in 1943. It didn't make it into McKinney's annotated laws until 1944. It preceded Erie County adopting the sanitary code in 1948. Interestingly, if you go to the Erie County Sanitary Code, which they publish on their website, you don't have to go more than a couple pages in. And on their introductory note, it plainly says, every rule, regulation, order, and direction adopted by the Board of Health shall state the date on which it takes effect, and a copy thereof signed by the health commissioner or his deputy shall be filed as a public record in the department. Erie County never did that. I only came to discover that when the Erie County Health Department fined my client, and as their attorney, they fined me $1,000 for our farm operation, feeding our poultry on the ground. Now that's where poultry eat. And that's not just my opinion. That's also the opinion of Cornell University, which is actually the state's designated veterinary school. Also interesting to note, the inspector who came out said the poultry troughs that are being used are not suitable containers to feed poultry in. Yet, ironically, Kevin, in 1911, a U.S. patent was issued to somebody in Hamburg, New York for, guess what, poultry feeding troughs. I found patents going back to at least 1872, so the U.S. government recognizes that poultry feeding troughs are suitable containers, notwithstanding what any health inspector from the Erie County Health Department thinks. So what's this law actually? What does it say? No person shall feed in the open any domestic or wild fowl, birds or animals other than in a suitable container, and in such a manner so as to prevent scattering of food upon the ground or ground levels, which can or will provide food for rodents, insects, or pests. The problem with that, and any attorney would instantly recognize, is it doesn't define the things it's requiring. It doesn't define what a suitable container is. It doesn't define a feeding manner. We ended up having to bring an Article 78 action against the Erie County Health Department. In the process, I had to foil New York State because, as I read the law, it was inconsistent with state law. It was simply inconsistent with state law. After 2 swipes, New York State went through all their laws. They found out that the sanitary code of Erie County had in fact not been filed. The only thing that had been filed was back in 2006 with their tattoo ordinance. And even then, at that time, the New York State Health Department cautioned Erie County, you have a problem here. You don't have general enforcement provisions. So in short, Kevin, there's a sanitary code. It was adopted in 1948. It was never filed, and it's not effective as a matter of law.
Has a court said that?
No, that's what the law is.
No, but has a court, have you gotten a Supreme Court justice of New York State to make that ruling?
That is what Section 347 of the health law states. It says, such board of health may formally promulgate, adopt, and publish rules, regulations, orders, and directions for the security.
But my question, Keith, is you filed an Article 78.
Yes.
Has that litigation been concluded?
It has not been concluded.
Now,
An order dismissal was issued by the county attorney's office, but we're still waiting.
No, I'm sorry, by the county attorney's office?
Yeah, we asked the judge to dismiss.
Oh, you've asked the judge, okay.
They responded.
So it's not like a county attorney had to file
The judge
it's
responded.
being litigated.
Yeah, I think right now, my last update is the waiting on a change of counsel order from Mr. Trippi's previous attorney by last year.
So focusing on the instant issue, on December 7th, the health commissioner sent a letter to your body, who was logged in. And I'll just read it so everyone will have the benefit of understanding what the situation was. This is from Gail Burstein, Commissioner of Health. It has come to my attention that this honorable body received a set of recommendations from the Erie County Agricultural Environmental Protection Board on November 17th of this year. These recommendations included a request to classify a property located at 1101 Ransom Road as part of the Erie County Agricultural District, with all the protection thereby afforded. I strongly encourage your honorable body to not include this parcel in your submission to the New York State Commissioner of Agriculture and Markets for final approval. 1101 Ransom Road has long been a source of repeat violations of the Erie County Sanitary Code for consistent and serious violations of Article 9, Section 1.15. Ongoing large-scale ground feeding of pigeons at this property has led to a rodent infestation of this property and neighboring residential housing. And birds consistently strike school buses transporting children to Grand Island Senior High School, located directly across the street, scattering their remains around the property and creating a safety risk for students. By attempting to classify this suburban residential property as certified agricultural land, the property owner is simply attempting to skirt the Erie County Sanitary Code so he can, and are you ready for this, continue to feed his flocks of pigeons with impunity. So there's a problem with this, and it's that the commissioner is fact challenged. I will say the fact. She's a liar. I immediately contacted the school district, and they immediately provided a letter to me that says, first, the district is unaware of any bird versus bus incidents. Second, we are also unaware of any bird carcasses on our property at 1100 Ransom Road due to the above. Finally, the district is extremely proactive with regards to pest control at our facilities. To date, we are unaware of any rodent issues. I next went to all of the adjoining property owners since Mrs. Burstein claims that there's a rodent infestation in the neighborhood. This is just one sheet. I have another one. It's all the adjoining properties. There is, in fact, no rodent infestation. She simply says, no rodent infestation exists at the property listed below that I own or occupy. Everyone wrote their addresses, the date, their name, and their signature.
Keith, what have you been cited for? I mean, she makes allusion to multiple citations. I mean, you have been cited, what is it specifically?
As I read, ground feeding animals and birds.
But how many citations are there? Are they, I mean, what's their, I guess my question is, what's their status? Have you paid a fine? Are you challenging that? Where are they and where are they?
They fined the property owner $1,000 and he has their attorney, and they ordered that the poultry no longer be fed at the farm. They have been out a total of 13 times. But I want to get to this point. It's a very important point. They've been out a total of 13 times. I have all of their inspection records. All of their inspection records. Not once is there any reference whatsoever to rodents. They have never found any rodents.
So I assume, in addition to your Article 78 concerning the failure to file document with Albany, you're also challenging these specific violation notices? And my simple question is, where are they now? Has a judge said, you know, you're right, you don't have to pay this fine? I'm just asking, is it still being litigated?
It's still being litigated.
No, you know.
But what we have before us is a letter from this individual telling us that there's a problem. I will make one further point. Gail Burstein is not only the Erie County Health Commissioner, she also sits on the Erie County Board of Health. If in fact there was a public health nuisance, she's obligated as a matter of law under 10 New York Code of Rules and Regulations, Section 8.2, to file a public nuisance complaint with the Board of Health. Since April 28, 2014, she has never done that. There's further evidence that no public health nuisance exists. Your honorable body every year gives the Buffalo Zoo approximately $1 million. The Buffalo Zoo, I have numerous photos, feeds its animals on the ground. The spokesperson for Buffalo Exterminating is president. But what I found rather ironic is, has the Erie County Health Department ever sued or brought the same issue up against the Buffalo Zoo? Perhaps not. Is it because the county executive is one of the pro members, or the county attorney, Michael Sergusa, is also one of the board members? So there's certainly selective enforcement. and
I
do not whatsoever-
strongly doubt that that's
I do not see this being applied to other people. Now, in July of last year, I was specifically instructed by Bob Summers, who did this. He said, and anything I've heard over the past year, your property is stated for protection from this kind of insanity. And so they actually issued a determination letter. This is something they rarely ever do. They issued a determination letter that says, rock dogs are poultry. And you're operating as a farm operation, because therefore have violated public land, you're entitled to be in an ag district. They didn't never do this, but they did in our case because it is so significant to them. And it affects every farmer in the county who would clearly be subject to the same violation notice. And there's not just one thing here. There are other things, such as you can't have, it claims you can't have standing water, but that's obviously in irrigation time. You can't have tall grass, that's forage. The other interesting thing to note about the violation notice that they filed, they brought up against us, was there's a line for rat/mouse infestation. Never checked it off. There's another one for bird feeding during infestation. Never checked it off. And again, I say they were out 13 times. Their records confirm there's never been a rodent issue. The health commissioner is just trying to raise an irrelevant.
We got about 5 minutes. I just want to give a heads up to everybody on that because I would like to pick up the place.
Keith, a couple quick comments. First of all, you're a wickedly smart attorney. I hire you. You're good at this.
Job offer.
The second point is, however, I live in your neighborhood. Frankly, I've heard people complain about the doves. I've never seen them. I've never seen any rats. There's probably more moles on my land than yours. I never saw a thing. However, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not sure you're a farmer. So you and I should talk. I wonder if there's some other ways we can protect you so you can carry on the things that you're passionate about without making sure that's a farm district in the middle of that neighborhood. And you and I can have a discussion. I just want to give you a forewarning that's coming. But I think what you've done for this group is very important and valuable. And so when I talk to you later, it's not an attack on you. I just think we can work on a solution other than saying it's an ag district. So I hope you're open to that discussion.
Well, and again, you need to be open to that. Ag and Markets has been scrutinized this since July of last year. This was, I mean, really, we've gone to the top level of the organization with their attorney also issuing this determination letter. And it's been emphasized to me again and again. You make sure that letter gets in the hands of Kevin Hardwick because you are absolutely entitled to be in the district. And you can't imagine more the illustrative example of someone who needs protection from a county agency other than your farm. So I'm happy to discuss all of that with you.
Well, I look forward to this discussion.
Kevin, the ridiculous thing about this whole thing, we're in our organic endeavor, everybody wants to go organic. There's a thing called free-range chicken.
I've seen several of them in the Erie County Legislature. I saw you, but I mean, I'm talking about people chicken. But anyway. I know I didn't have to explain the joke.
You're going to thank us for being here, but I got to thank you for coming.
Well, listen.
And you for coming, and Mr. Billiga, and you from Marilla, and everyone else, because this, to us, is very, very important. And we feel we have actually been heard, and we feel like we've had some representation, and we feel clearly that, maybe understand some of the problems we've run into. If I can speak for everyone else here.
I'd like to say one more thing. We got brought up about the right to farm law. And the Department of Environment Planning took some, whether it's justified or not, hits. I want to point out, you know where the right to farm law started? The first town they had the right to farm law was a town road back in 1996 when I came on the town board. And you know who helped me draft that? Was Chad Jasinski from the Department of Environmental Planning, Chief Planner, and Tom Deeren and all of them worked with us to do it. It was the first one in New York State, and that's where it started.
I think we also owe a great debt to Earl for coming up from Marilla. And dinner. I want to thank everybody for coming. And you know what? I think as it stands now, I think aside from Keith's problem, and the terrible thing is, Keith has done all the work, pulled everybody together, and it's his property that has the hang up. I like what the supervisor suggests. I hope that, I hope that the litigation ends. I would encourage you to, assuming it does and it goes favorably, reapply next year, because I'm certainly open to it, Keith. I was there yesterday. But I think what the supervisors offer, I would hope you would take that up. And I would hope that the town would take up, everybody would take up the county's offer to work with it in master planning, because, I think that will lead to good things happening on the island. And again, I thank you for coming out.